Hopefully it's a useful hour. Hopefully we stick to an hour, and hopefully the session is useful to you regardless of where you are in your life journey or assessment journey, whether it's trying to find your 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 career path, what you would like to study going forward. If you are already applying for jobs, where would assessments fit in there? Maybe you're a little bit older and looking to develop in your career or looking for a new career path, and assessments also have a role there. So I think let's jump straight into it. We have a little bit of a roadmap for today, starting with what are assessments. I think we assume that everybody on the call was really interested by the title. So we want to know how can we almost hack assessments so that we can get the job or at least be shortlisted. But what are assessments? What counts as an assessment? Is it something that you complete on social media? Maybe there's something that you'll see on Facebook. Complete these nice questions to get to know about your personality. Does an interview count as an assessment? If a practitioner sends you something that looks a little bit like a game, does that count as an assessment? So what are assessments? Why should we use them? Where do we use them? And that then takes me to point number 2, why use them? So there's multiple purposes for it. I think we've touched on them already. Hopefully we get to touch on it a little, like go into a little bit more detail. I think why most of us are on the call is to talk about your role, not my role, your role as a test taker. I tend to be the practitioner in assessment use, but I have been a test taker myself. So I do understand the anxiety and pressure and possibly the uncertainties around what you need to do when given an online assessment. So now you've completed the assessment, now what? Where do assessments actually fit in this whole process? Does an assessment result by itself determine whether you'll get a job or not? Does an assessment result by itself determine, okay, well, this is the career path you need to follow? And then here at the end, I have put a Q&A spot, so we can hopefully unmute everybody and you can ask your questions. But please, throughout the session, if there are any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we will answer them as we go along. So, who am I and why am I talking to you about this? As my introduction indicated, I'm a psychometrist and a research psychologist. Those sound like very, very big words. But as a psychometrist, what I do is I administer psychometric assessments, score them and interpret them, put them into reports sometimes and give feedback to candidates and possible managers or decision makers, using assessments to make decisions. As a researcher, however, I actually work on the development side. So actually make and build these assessments. If I'm not building them myself, then I get to validate and standardize other people's assessments. More big words. So what that means is people will develop an assessment and we need to make sure that it's scientifically sound, that, you know what, it's reliable, it's valid. I will talk about what reliability and validity is in a little bit. Make sure that it's fair, especially since we are living in South Africa, and there has been a little bit of discrimination against certain individuals, certain gender populations, certain ethnic groups, to make sure that it's fair and standardized regardless. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the aim of an assessment should be that we should not unfairly discriminate against someone that grew up in a township in Limpopo compared to a person that went to a private school in Sandton. We're trying to standardize assessments, especially for job selection, to make sure that everyone has a fair chance. Part of my role is mapping assessments to client needs. My clients tend to be a little bit more on the corporate side, but I have also worked a lot with schools and individual clients as well, a lot of career counseling, and kind of what JVR Psychometrics, the company that I work for, but also my own personal values, is to try and identify talent, guide development, and unlock potential. Again, more big words. What does identifying talent mean? Guiding development, what type of development? And unlocking potential, what does that actually mean? So we are all current or potential employees in the 21st century. And in the 21st century, according to the World Economic Forum, there are certain skills that would make us a little bit more competitive, a little bit more desirable as employees. So there are certain cognitive skills, such as being analytical, being able to solve critically, complex problem solving, active learning, detail orientation, and time management. As you can pick up, as I was reading through those cognitive, there's quite a few things there. Maybe complex problem solving is something that the robots might take away from us in future. But for now, we still need people that can program those robots. So those are still cognitive skills that we as individuals still need to have. From a creative side, that is where artificial intelligence and robots will definitely not take our jobs. They will only do what we tell them to do. They can't be creative, tapping into that right side of our brains, being original, innovation, resource and content skills, things that make us quite human. And of course, the absolute thing that makes us human are social skills, emotional intelligence, social skills, initiative, being trustworthy, having a leadership type of personality and coordination. Right. So now we know, and you could know for yourself if you went onto Google, that these are the skills that organizations want. So if you are in matric and are wanting to know, okay, well, what should I study? Or if you are now busy writing your CV, these are skills that you would want to kind of sneak in onto your CV. Oh, I'm very emotionally intelligent. Oh, I'm quite innovative. Okay, well, that's lovely. And I'm sure if you're putting it on your CV, I trust you that you're honest about it. But so are so many other people. Everybody knows that these are the skills that companies are looking for today. So how do we know who actually has these skills and who's just putting it on their CV? That's where assessments come in. It's a little bit more objective than our subjective CV writing skills. Also, emotional intelligence and social skills are some things that we can fake it until you make it. So, for example, I'm quite an introvert, but here I am being social and doing a webinar. How do you actually know whether I can be social in a job like a call center agent, which requires me to be social for hour upon hour upon hour at end? That is where psychometrics comes in. It's a little bit more of an objective idea of what your skills are. Okay. So I've hinted at a definition, but again, what is a psychometric assessment? We have our researchers and our sociologists, our psychologists, even our business owners who know what competencies, what specific skills they want their staff members to have. We all come together and carefully select questions that tap into some aspects of your skills, of your personal qualities, of your abilities, of your behaviors, and into your thinking styles. Because we also don't want to overcomplicate your jobs. So if you, for example, prefer thinking in complex terms, we don't necessarily want to give you something that's a little less complex because you're going to get bored in the job. Likewise, we don't want to give you something that's too complex because then you might feel overwhelmed and leave the job. So psychometrics play quite a role in job fit and creating that like happy spot. So it can be used definitely for career development and in finding your career path, but throughout your career journey, there's quite a bit of value in psychometric assessments, even outside the workplace. So I know most of us are here to slot in psychometrics into our job journey, but even in the educational realm, to identify a child that might have ADHD, or to identify someone with depression. Those are still psychometric assessments that we use to tap into a person's behaviors, thinking styles, personality. It is a psychometric scientific measure. And what I mean by scientific is that some studies, lots of research does have to be done to show that it measures what it says it does. If it measures what it says it does, then we call it a valid assessment. So I'm telling you it's a personality assessment. The results that I get from it tell me, oh, you got quite extroverted, you are very agreeable, you very helpful personality traits, then we can say it's valid. If it's measuring it accurately, so if I just ask you in an interview, are you quite sociable? And you say, yes, I love talking. And if on the psychometric assessment, after all of the checks have been done, your results also say, yes, you know what, this person enjoys talking, then we can say that this assessment is reliable. It's measuring that trait reliably and accurately. It is a formal process. That's the difference between a psychometric assessment and one of those questionnaires that you complete on Facebook, which is a little bit more informal. There's been less research done on those, which makes it slightly less fair. In a South African situation, especially for job selection, it needs to be a formal scientific assessment to make the whole process fair. So, talking about online assessments, if you Google, which is what I did yesterday, if you Google psychometric assessments on Google, you get approximately 50 million results in under a second. That's insane, right? And then they also give you a very nice definition in case my earlier definition didn't make too much sense. It is any activity, so it can be any activity. It can be an interview, it can be a simulation exercise, it can be a practical activity, it can be an online assessment that is conducted in order to evaluate a candidate's performance and includes their skills, knowledge, abilities, personality traits, attitudes, their job and academic potential for your younger ones, particularly what should I study going forward. And a psychometric assessment can be called an aptitude test, a behavioral test, or an assessment center, but there's other types of psychometric tests as well. Also, from your 15 million results, the things people ask most is, how do I prepare for a psychometric assessment? Hopefully I'll answer that today. What can I expect from a psychometric assessment? Hopefully I'll answer that today as well. What are the different types of psychometric assessments? That's forever evolving. And what type of questions are asked in psychometric tests? Something that you really should not be worrying about. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. You also see a whole lot of free things online. So like free online aptitude tests, learn how to, what career will fit me, aptitude tests. This assessment will measure your overall cognitive ability, a simulation of a pre-employment assessment test. By all means, if you want to do these types of assessments, go for it. If it will calm your nerves a little bit before completing an assessment for a job, or before, like as part of the aptitude battery, if you're entering university, complete them if you want. But there is a note of caution that these assessments, they are freely available on the internet. They don't quite have that reliability, validity, all that scientific evidence I was trying to talk about earlier, don't have that same type of backing. Also because it's freely available online, you can complete it again and again and again, which means that the integrity of the assessment, the fairness of the assessment is missing a little bit. So online assessments, lots of them, doesn't mean all of them hold the same weight in a job selection or in helping you choose your career path. So can we use free assessments to make selection decisions? No, we cannot. Can we use free assessments to make development decisions? Depends. So I think if you are in matric and wanting to know, okay, what should I study? There are some assessments that might be a little bit more validated if you're on a proper website. But the free stuff on Google, probably you shouldn't use that to make a life decision, like what am I going to study going forward? Why should we use assessments? So like I said, when I was talking about the CV, not that you would necessarily lie in the CV, but A CV is just a small piece of paper. In an interview, you only have maybe 30 minutes to try and convince this person that you are the best applicant for the job. Assessments take out a little bit of that guesswork. It's a little bit more objective and tells us more than how you can behave for half an hour. Of course, so we use what's called the iceberg methodology to try to explain this. So looking at me now, for example, that's above the surface, and you can see certain things about me. You can see my demonstrated competence, hopefully. Well, I'm on Zoom. I know how to use Zoom. I know how to use PowerPoint, and we are doing a little bit of a simulation exercise here. I'm pretending to give a presentation, although I'm not pretending, I really am. And there's also that professional reputation. So yes, we can have an interview and ask me about my competence, or you can ask questions and I'll try and answer that. And in doing that, demonstrate my competence. But below the surface, just by talking to me now, you can't really pick up what my personality is, whether I'm really good at maths. And as a researcher, well, I kind of have to be quite good at maths. My motives. So what is it that made me want to become a psychologist? Is it the money? Is it helping people? Is it the fame and reputation that I'm getting from doing this webinar? What are my actual abilities and my emotional intelligence? Absolutely, for this half an hour, I can totally care about your career decisions, how I actually feel about what life choices you make after that. Well, of course, I do care. That's why I chose this job. But I mean, I could also be faking it just for this half an hour. So that is why we tend to use assessments to get to know a person beyond the surface, below the surface, and it taps into those bits that you might be able to fake short term, but these are the things that drive you, that make you behave a certain way. That you might lie about in an interview or a CV, or you might not know. I mean, maybe you don't know what career path you should choose. You're not entirely sure where your personality will fit well in, or, well, these are my values. What type of job would I fit well in? And these types of assessments will help you find that career fit. Why is it important? So again, a little bit more on the corporate side, but a recent study, so a 2018 study, found that 40% of managers say that they struggle to find the right employee. So sometimes you might just select a person, okay, well, you have the qualification, you did very well in the interview, and now you're in the job. And then you're not quite there. Or you might have the technical expertise, but as a team member, you are horrible. You don't get on with any of your colleagues. Or the alternative, you might get on really well with your team members, but you don't actually perform. So you have the qualifications, you know, you have your academic record to prove how awesome you are, but you don't actually deliver on any of your projects. Why is that? Managers also found, or employees found, 2 out of 3 employees would rather prefer to work elsewhere because that career, that role fit isn't there. So I want to help people, but I'm sitting and doing maths, stats as a researcher the whole day. I don't want to work here. I'd rather move somewhere else because the job role doesn't quite fit with my motives, my personality, my values. Up to 60% of hiring decisions will prove to be mistakes. This tends to be slightly lower if assessments are used. But again, I think if we're using the quite subjective interview and CV checks, asking for references, that by itself is quite subjective. And then later on, you find that we probably shouldn't have hired that person. There's a little bit too many red flags or like wrong behaviors that's happening here. Up to 95% of applicants exaggerate to land the job. I'm not saying anybody's lying, but the reality is that life is hard. We're living in South Africa. The unemployment rate is insane. And I started off with telling you what these key skills are. So everybody's going to say, well, of course, I mean, I was a prefect in school and my leadership abilities are awesome. And, I became a psychologist because I so want to help people. You're going to exaggerate so that to the interviewer's eyes, you are going to be the best person ever. But reality is we all definitely have strengths, but we also all have lots of development areas. We don't always give both of them equal airtime in an interview, or definitely not on our CV. So assessments help us highlight both of those in a little bit more detail. Up to 75% of employees regard the immediate boss as causing more stress than their own family or even their finances. Again, speaking to fit, again, speaking to emotional intelligence. You can say I'm a very emotionally intelligent person. I'm really not assertive at all. I'm very caring, very loving. And if you're 18 years old, your only experience in being emotionally intelligent might be with your parents, who you have to, by the laws of nature, have to love and respect, and your friends, who of course are your friends, so you love and respect them too. It doesn't say much about how you're actually going to behave in the workplace. Whereas an online assessment, or an assessment in general, tells you a little bit more about how you will interact in the workplace, how you will react to stresses, how you will react to being under lots of time pressure, and so forth. So, question time. I hope we have a poll. If you don't have a poll, that's fine. Put it in the chat box. Have you ever completed a questionnaire? Yay, we have a poll. Have you completed a questionnaire that has asked you about your personality, your interests, your values? Thank you, ladies, for putting up the poll. Okay, we have about 70 people, 70% of people that have voted. A few more. Oh, okay. Going to give it a few more seconds. Right, doesn't look like anyone else wants to vote. And we're actually on the 50-50 split. So 50%, hopefully, okay, share results. 50% have said yes, they have previously done an online assessment, 50% say no. So the 50% that said yes, hopefully this is still meaningful for you and you get to learn a little bit more about how to approach online assessments. For everybody that said no, well, enjoy the learning session. Okay. So, like I hinted at earlier, the use of psychological tests, whether they are online or paper and pencil, in South Africa, they are all guided by a number of laws and acts that we need to abide by. So firstly, we have the Health Professions Act. So if you are measuring something that looks at a person's personality or cognitive ability or values or motives or anything that explains how they function in their day-to-day life, that is actually a psychological act, and you need to be a psychological professional, a psychologist or a psychometrist or a registered counselor to be able to administer those types of tests. As a result, so there's certain things that teachers can do, there's certain things that occupational therapists can do, but overall, if you are looking at a person's makeup, personality makeup, psychological makeup, that falls under the Health Professions Act. And Google, for example, does not fall under the Health Professions Act. Another one is the Employment Equity Act. So especially if you are applying for a job, in your job processes, in addition to looking at your CV and having your interviews and whatever other processes you have, if you are using assessments in your job selection process, it needs to abide by certain standards indicated by the Employment Equity Act. The Employment Equity Act says that assessments need to be scientifically shown to be fair, not biased, so it cannot differentiate between a male and a female, a black and a white person, and it needs to be shown to be reliable, so accurate over time, and valid, measuring what it's saying it's measuring. If it's saying it's measuring personality, we need to prove with lots of research, scientifically prove, write it up in a manual that yes, this is definitely measuring these aspects of personality. Likewise, if we assess you today and we assess you in 6 months' time and then a year again, and your responses are quite similar, then we can say, yes, well, this is also reliable. It's accurate over time. We also need to abide, especially now that things are online, according to the POPI Act, also known as long name, the Protection of Personal Information Act. We cannot keep information we should not be keeping about you, especially since this is really confidential information. Knowing how you think, knowing your personality, strengths and weaknesses, knowing what motivates and drives you, that's really personal stuff. We don't want that out there in public. And sometimes completing assessments on Google, you're not necessarily sure whether what the copyright's there, what is actually involved there, where is your data being stored. Whereas if you do a proper online assessment, there's lots of rules that need to be in place on how your data is actually stored. And that all links then to the ethical rules of conduct that all psychologists that use these assessments have been trained on. So we know to keep your information confidential. We know not to look at an assessment result in isolation, because yes, how you completed an assessment on a day needs to be valid and reliable, but you are so much more than your responses on one questionnaire. So we've also been trained to look at your responses in addition to so many other things, called a holistic approach. We also need to talk about the predictive value, which links to, again, that concept of validity. Are we measuring what we're saying we're measuring? So in 2016, we had a few researchers look at the predictive value of doing certain things during a job selection process. So they had an interview with some people, and then a year later looked at how well a person was actually performing in the role. So people that performed well in an interview compared to how well they were performing in the role 1 year later, that had a 0.38 validity. If we're reading validity, so a score of 0.0 on that end means non-existent, no relationship between the two. The closer to 1 that we get means that there's a very close relationship between the two things that we're looking at. So in this case, the interview and your work performance, there's a bit of a weak relationship there. It does predict whether you'll do well, but there's things that predict it better. Job experience was quite low. So just because you've been doing a job for years and years and years doesn't mean you're necessarily doing it well. Especially now in the 21st century, with COVID happening, with everything moving online, jobs are changing at a pace. I think previous presenters that have been speaking in the series have been saying that, you know what, you may change jobs over years. So just because you've been a manager for 20 years doesn't mean you're a good manager. Experience itself isn't a very good predictor. And reference checks is also not that high because, of course, you're going to ask people that like you or you think like you, that you have good relationships with, to be your references. If we look at psychometric assessments then and how they fit into this whole process, cognitive ability, out of everything that we use during a job selection process, cognitive ability was the highest predictor of whether you will do well in a role or not. I must say that this does not mean that whenever you have to complete a cognitive assessment, I mean, of course, you need to aim to get the best mark that you can, but it doesn't mean that the people with the highest cognitive scores will always get the job. You wouldn't necessarily want a genius that can think up new ideas all the time to be a call center agent. No disrespect to a call center agent, or a receptionist, or something that requires a little bit less innovation or a little bit less complex thinking. Because again, we're talking job fit. Someone with a very, very high cognitive ability is going to get quite bored in a job like that. Likewise, we wouldn't also want someone with a lower cognitive ability in a very complex role, because that's going to overwhelm them. Integrity is also a very big predictor of how well you're going to do in the workplace. Integrity meaning, will you lie at work? Will you steal at work? Often how we measure that is, it comes across as if we're measuring personality, but we're actually asking about your integrity. Personality, however, is also somewhat of a good predictor of whether you will do well in the workplace, as is the EQ, your emotional intelligence, because I mean, very few of us actually have jobs where we work in isolation. Most of us do need to work in teams that require some sort of emotional building. And even if we entrepreneurs with our own businesses, we still have clients that we need to negotiate with and persuade. So emotional intelligence is also quite important. Who uses psychometric assessments? So companies that employ more than 100 people tend to use it more, probably maybe because they have the budget for it. But all of your big successful companies have definitely taken on this trend of using assessments. And across, so whether you're just starting your career journey or whether you're already quite high up in the organization, everybody tends to use assessments. But we do find that the higher up you go, or the older you get, the more likely you are going to complete psychometric assessments. So, okay, well, we've asked a similar question, and I realize I'm running a little bit late. So, I've spoken about personality, I've spoken about cognitive ability, I've spoken about emotional intelligence. But from my side, because I have clients asking me, Pakeezah, please give me an assessment. I want to measure whether a person is a good fit for this role. Very rarely does that question come across exactly how I've said it. It's normally, Pakeezah, I would like to know what this person's learning potential is if we are doing a career development. I would like to know how likely it is that this person is going to burn out in this role. I would like to know, sometimes it is, I would like to know how intelligent this person is, but it tends to be, how impulsive is this person going to be? Should they, if we're selecting for someone that works in the mines, where health and safety is really important, is this person going to make impulsive decisions? Is this person going to be a good manager? Sometimes the question is asked, this is a very high stress job. Is this person going to show signs of stress and pathology? Is this person going to be a quick learner? So those are the types of questions we get asked, and then we tend to map assessments, online or otherwise, to them. I've hinted at this, but psychometric assessments are only part of the process. So I do realize we're a little bit of a mixed batch on the call. So I'm going to talk through both processes because psychometrics does fall into both of them. Regardless of where you are in your career journey, whether you've just matriculated or are looking for a new job, you will be asked to complete psychometric assessments, but where it is in the bigger picture, let's delve into that a little bit. So it might be for recruitment and selection, as we've discussed. So you send through your CV, you send through proof of all your academic qualifications, you send through your reference checks, and then, well done, you have been shortlisted. Please complete this assessment for us. That's the one that we hear about most often. Sometimes you're now already in the role, but you're not quite performing as well as we hoped, or we're seeing that morale is down, or just the general atmosphere is down, the engagement is down, then we tend to do more psychometric assessments to see, okay, well, what is the company's values? What are your values? What's motivating you? Is the company speaking to what is motivating you to try and bring up that engagement? Performance management. Again, that is where cognitive assessments might come in well. This person is just not performing according to standard. Then we might bring in an assessment. Well, you know what? It's actually because you are overwhelming this poor person. Training and development, and then workforce planning and succession planning. Okay, well, this person has been working for us for forever. They're a wonderful person to work with. They have the skills. Let's promote them to a manager. And suddenly they become a manager and aren't performing that well. It might be that on the technical side, their skills are really, really good. They might be a really agreeable person, so have a really cool personality as well, but they don't have other aspects of their personality that would make them a good manager. So that's from the recruitment side of things where assessments fall in. Also, psychometrics by themselves is not all that matters. The interview does still have some weight, even though it might be a little bit less valid in the larger scheme. Your knowledge, your education, your expertise is definitely important. I mean, nobody cares what your psychometric reports look like if you're applying to be an engineer with only a grade 8 pass. So knowledge and education is definitely still important. Your performance is important. So, I mean, yes, the psychometrics are there to predict how well you're going to perform in the role or what type of personality you have, but how you actually perform in the role once you're in the role, that's on you. So the results of a psychometric assessment by itself does not determine your destiny for forever and beyond. And so it is your experience and your skills. We will still choose people that have more experience and more skills, even if they have beautiful psychometrics, but none of the others. If they can't perform on any of the other areas, that person will not automatically get the job. So why we were all here today, and I took 45 minutes to get to this point. So how do we approach these online assessments? Because it sounds quite scary, because the results of these online assessments may determine your career path, how you perform at work, do you get the job? So how do we approach these things? There's both rights and responsibilities that you should remember. If you are completing a proper assessment with a psychological professional, before you complete it, they will remind you of your rights and responsibilities. Obviously, if you're doing something for free on Google, all of this goes out the window, which is why those aren't really what you should be doing. So pre-COVID, we used to have paper and pencil assessments on my left, I think on all of our left-hand sides, and we have online assessments, which is where the focus is today. So long ago, when assessments first started, all assessments, your personality, your values, your cognitive assessments, all used to be paper and pencil, and we always used to have a supervisor with us. So your psychologist standing with you, kind of like might feel as if you were completing a normal test, because you'd have someone watching you while you complete your assessments. Now that we've moved online, and online assessments have been around for many years, but I think COVID has really forced all of us online. Sometimes you might still have your psychologist on the other side. So I could start a Zoom session like this. Yeah, I am. And I have you as my client, and I'm asking you, please share your screen with me and complete this assessment. That would be online supervision testing. But what we see more often is, especially with our personality and values assessments, is, okay, you'll get an email from someone with a little link saying, please click this link and complete this assessment unsupervised. So there you are, sometimes on your bed, sometimes in your lounge, sometimes still in your pajamas, completing assessments based on your personality, abilities, values, and is this the right thing? Should you be doing it under these situations? Let's discuss. So why do we, as a professional, why do I think supervision should be there? Well, the most important thing is that it helps to ensure that it's standard. So there's no thing of, okay, well, I completed the assessment at 8 o'clock this morning after my first cup of coffee, so I was nice and fresh. Whereas you completed the assessment tonight after putting the kids to sleep, after having quite a big supper. So you kind of drowsy, kind of want to fall asleep, and now you're quickly doing this assessment. Having it supervised with a professional, make sure that the whole situation is a lot more under control, which makes the whole process a little bit more fairer. It also allows practitioners to verify that the person completing the assessment is the person who should be completing the assessment. So typically we don't really see this for development reasons, because you want to develop, you want to know about yourself, you want to know your career path. But now selection, and you know that you're probably shortlisted for the top 5. but you know that you're not necessarily the best person at verbal reasoning, for example. They told you that the test is going to look at your spelling ability, and you know your spelling sucks. So you're going to ask your friend who's really good in English to do your test for you. If it's not supervised, then the practitioner might not know that it wasn't you that completed the assessment. Whereas if it is supervised, please put on your camera. There we go. I can see you. You are completing the assessment. You should be completing the assessment, and everything is on board. It also reduces the opportunity for cheating if there is supervision. Especially with our ability assessments, there's normally big disclaimers. Please do not use a calculator. Please do not use any writing materials. You need to think out the answers in your head. And sometimes people cheat. And if it's supervised, then you can't cheat. Much like when we were in school and you would have our invigilators walking up and down to reduce cheating. It also allows practitioners to provide you with support. So as soon as you have a question, I'm not quite sure what this question means, you should have a practitioner or professional there to help answer your questions. And it also helps protect the integrity of the assessment so that it can be used fairly and validly and reliably with clients after you. So long before COVID happened, a lot of assessments used to happen face-to-face with supervision. Then COVID happened and a lot is now being supervised, but there are times when sometimes practitioners think it's less important to have supervision. So typically for your cognitive assessments, we will still have over Zoom sessions where we ask, okay, please switch your camera on and then do an online supervision session. But in those times where you just sent a link, please complete these assessments and you'll hear from us soon, what should you do? What are your rights and responsibilities then? So if you are completing an assessment by yourself, make sure that, or ask, you can ask, that you are assessed appropriately. So if you sent an assessment, you can ask, well, you know what, generally, who do you use this assessment for? Is it normed? So is my results going to be compared against other South African people? When do you tend to use these assessments? The assessments must also meet professional standards. Nothing that you as a test taker need to worry about, but something that you can ask. So now that I've thrown fancy words around, you can ask, well, is this assessment reliable for the South African population? Is this assessment valid? Have you guys done some research on it for South Africa? It is well within your rights as test takers to ask that. Of course, you can't really ask Google that. So that's why even if you're completing online assessments, go the paid route. You must be informed of the nature and the purpose of assessments. So most of the time, so if you're on a career development journey, then you know, okay, fine, I'm not sure what I want to study. Then you know why you're completing assessments. If you've applied for a job, you've sent your CV through and in return you get a link, then you kind of know why you're completing assessments. If you're in a job, however, and suddenly your manager asks you, please complete this assessment, it's well within your rights to ask, why am I completing this assessment? Do you want to know more about my motivations? Do you want to know more? Is this a performance tracker? Is it for succession planning? Please ask, what is the purpose of this assessment? Please also ask, who will see your results? Like I mentioned earlier, we have the POPI Act helping us here. It is personal information. It is confidential information. This is about your functioning. It's a very, very personal data. So please do ask, who will be seeing your results? If you are applying for a job, even if you're applying for a job, ask, is all the agents going to see my results? Is it only the manager that's hiring me that's going to ask for the results? Is it only the practitioner that is going to see the results? Will I see the results? And you are definitely allowed to see your results. Maybe not in the exact form, so there may be different types of reports that come out of these assessments, but you definitely are allowed to get feedback. There is that question about who's going to pay for that feedback. So if you applied for a job at a company, you completed assessments, you didn't get the job, and now you would like to know a little bit more about your assessments, legally, you are allowed to get feedback. The company, however, because they've decided to go with a different candidate, might not pay for that feedback. So there may be cost involved in that, but you're absolutely well within your rights to ask for feedback. Responsibilities. The joy, every time you get it right, it comes with a responsibility. Can I prepare for psychological assessments? That's probably the most asked question. Yes, you can prepare by resting and staying calm. The way we put assessments together, I mean, we know what your skills are because you send through your CV, you send through your qualifications. So most of the time when we're talking about a cognitive assessment, we're not asking you very technical knowledge that a normal exam would have asked you in university or in school, unless you're doing a technical assessment. But either way, you can't really study for them. So can you open up a book and study for an online assessment? No, you can't. It's not an exam. The best way to prepare is by resting, having a good cup of coffee in the morning, and staying calm throughout it all. Does your nerves affect your performance? Depends. So on your cognitive assessments, it may make you a little bit more nervous. You may then not think clearly. So with your cognitive assessments, please try and stay calm. With your personality and motives assessments, no. The way these assessments have been written is that it kind of picks up that or accounts for the fact that you may be a little bit nervous or anxious. No distractions. The worst thing is you sitting here trying to do this assessment because you really want the job, and then your phone starts ringing, and then maybe an email pops up because you're completing it on your laptop, and an email pops up, you forget that you're completing the assessment, you go and answer the email. In the meantime, the ticker on your assessment is ticking, which makes it look as if you're responding very slowly. Please make sure no distractions. Also check your internet stability and system requirements. This has now fallen on you as the test taker. Before, most of the time, even if it was an online assessment, you would go through to the people that were asking you to complete the assessments. They would then obviously make sure that they had enough data, or that the fiber connection was all good, that the laptops were updated. Now with COVID and a lot of things happening virtually and online, you need to make sure for yourself before you start the assessment that you have sufficient data. Please, if you don't have sufficient data, first make sure that you get enough data before. If you're going to rush through the assessment because, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of data, that's going to affect your results. And with many of these assessments, you can't complete the assessment more than once within a 12 or 24-month period. So if you messed it up the first time, that responsibility kind of falls on you. You can't necessarily always ask for a retake. So please check that your internet is stable and make sure that the system requirements are also fine. Make sure you're running on the latest version of Firefox or Google or Internet Explorer. If you don't have a laptop, if you are completing it on your cell phone, first check with the practitioner that you can complete that assessment on your cell phone. We are very aware that most people are completing assessments on cell phones, so most systems are becoming cell phone friendly, but do just check that it's okay to complete on your cell phone. Also keep the contact details of the person that asked you to complete the assessment handy. So in the case that you suddenly run out of data, or an error message pops up, or we live in South Africa, load shedding happens, you can quickly pick up the phone and tell your practitioner, listen, I'm going to need a retest, or something wrong happened, so that they know beforehand. Because if you just leave it and then hours, days later say, oh, okay, well, this is what happened, it's not going to sound like a very good excuse, because some people do lie about why they did not perform well on an assessment. Ask questions, please. Like I said, it's also your right to ask questions. If you're not sure why you're completing an assessment, if you're not sure how to complete an assessment, ask the practitioner, whether it's supervised or not. I mean, if you're completing it online by yourself, please make sure that you are comfortable with it before you go ahead. Inform the practitioner of disabilities and limitations. So if data is a huge concern, let the practitioner know so that they can maybe make an alternative. Some tests require you to click the blue apples and the pink clouds, for example. If you are colorblind, let the practitioner know, because then you aren't going to be able to pick the blue apples because you can't identify them. Likewise, so if you maybe lost a limb or are mute, that might not affect your psychometric performance, but it may affect your journey elsewhere in the selection process or development process. So inform practitioners beforehand of any disabilities. Likewise, if you've had a rough day and you have a horrible headache and you are on COVID medication or whatever, they don't really have medication, but if you're not feeling well, didn't sleep well last night, and you need to complete an assessment now, especially a cognitive assessment, your mind is not in the right place. Inform your practitioner of that, because otherwise you're going to complete this assessment, you're not in the best of moods, you're not going to do well on it, and then you can't recomplete it, and your results may work against you. Be honest. So be honest. I think you can't really not be honest in a cognitive assessment unless they say, please don't use a calculator, and there you go. Use your calculator anyway. It will flag. So many of these systems do have anti-cheating checks in. If you get too many items correct that you probably shouldn't be getting correct, it will flag. Likewise with your personality. People tend to think that there's a right or wrong personality for a job. Maybe because there is definitely a career fit, but don't try and answer a personality or a motives questionnaire according to what you think they want to see. Again, there are questions there. So, I mean, I've seen in an integrity questionnaire, they ask, do you tell lies? And it's like, strongly agree. I have told lies many, many times, and strongly disagree. I have never, ever, ever told a lie. If you say, I have never, ever, ever told a lie, you are lying. We are all human. We've all told a white lie at least once in our lives. There's questions like that you think, okay, if I say, I have to say that answer. Don't try and answer what you think we want to hear. Answer how you actually are, especially with your personality and motives questionnaires. Read and follow instructions. Once again, ask the questions, read the instructions, because the results of this tend to have implications, especially for your job selections, especially for your succession planning. If the assessment was completed incorrectly, that's your responsibility, especially now that things are being done online. Inform the practitioner if something went wrong. I discussed that a few lines up with keeping contact. And please, for the integrity of the assessment, for being an honest person, for being an ethical person, do not share the questions and the answers with your family and friends, because that just messes up the whole process, and it's not ethical. Almost done. So you've now completed your assessment. Now what? Ask for feedback. If you're asking for feedback, also ask about the cost implications related to that, but ask for feedback so that you can see where your development areas are, what your strengths are as well. Also remember that more than the assessment results count. So remember the puzzle that I had up earlier. Remember the cycle that I had. Your experiences, your other abilities, your interview process, all of that also counts. And also that there's no right personality. So don't try and fake it until you make it on these assessments. You might just not be the right fit for the role. And there we go. I am done on the hour.
Wow, exactly. I was so fascinated. I didn't want to stop you because I saw we are reaching to the 1 hour. I think this was fascinating and very useful. I must be honest, when I looked at your question about if I ever done online assessment, and I thought the last time I did an assessment from a work or psychometric was on paper. So I didn't actually do online. I'm one of those 50% that didn't. But I see that Philip asked quite a few questions. If you guys are okay to stay, I know that we've completed the hour, but let me take you through I'll read you the 3 questions. Why one's presence on social media, very subjective, are used by potential employers, clients to look for to assess one's suitability for the employment contract. The other questions from Philip is, please talk to the role of psychometric assessments when dealing with criminals appearing in court and the value to the state and defense. Here, other curiosity. And another one is, in terms of psychometric assessment, how does this differ from the corporate key performance assessment indicator?
Okay, so let's start from the top, Philip. Wonderful, Philip. I hope it's Philip. Hopefully, I can answer each one. Okay, so social media should not be used by itself to make selection decisions or promotion decisions. However, how you portray yourself on social media can be an indicator of how you will perform in the workplace. So especially in the case of, we've been seeing it more now, that people that tend to have certain personalities also then go onto social media to vent about how horrible their work was, how horrible their bosses were. And that then has negative implications for the company's reputation. So that's why some companies may look at social media. However, social media by itself is not an assessment, so it cannot be used to assess whether you're a good employee or not by itself. First
but
one.
Just from an employer point of view, I love your iceberg that you showed. Yes, the top, and then but most of it is at the bottom. So when an employer is looking for the bottom, one of the ways to look at the bottom is social media and how you behave in social media, what's your language like, how you present yourself.
Absolutely, but I mean, like, social media is also a place. I mean, if you follow me on social media, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. What you find on my personal LinkedIn profile is quite different to what you'll find on my Facebook profile. If you look at my Facebook profile, absolutely, I do share things about psychology, but I have interests and things that interest me beyond the workplace that I also share on my Facebook, that does not link to how good an employee I am at all. So just social media by itself should definitely not be used by employers. But absolutely, to your point, it does give you some hints as to how this person behaves with others. Is this person always partying? Is this person a little bit impulsive? Okay, please talk to the role of psychometric assessment when dealing with criminals. Yes, so in that case, there's psychometric assessments, not the ones that we covered today, but specific ones that look at psychopathology. And again, there are assessments that look at, are you faking it? There's specific assessments that look at, are you faking sanity, or are you actually insane? Are you a sociopath? Were you in control of your actions? I work a little bit less in that realm. I do tend to work with a normal population in the workplace and with schools, but a different type of assessment is used with criminals. And typically those still tend to be paper and pencil, largely. In terms of psychometric assessments, yes. So normally we have our psychometric assessments according to the iceberg that measures things like personality and motives. We are then trained as human resource practitioners to be able to link that to your KPIs. So we can say that, okay, fine, a person that, if we're looking at agreeableness, for example, a person that is higher on agreeableness may be a better team leader because they would be willing to listen to people's problems and problem solve with them. However, too high agreeableness might be that this person only then listens to people's problems, that they don't actually get any of their own work done. So there's, again, a lot of science behind it. There's people that study that extensively in the HR departments that link the results to a psychometric assessment to competencies. Because again, in the workplace, nobody talks in psychometric language. We do talk in KPIs and competencies. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
I think there's another question is how does one become a psychiatrist?
One becomes a psychiatrist not by becoming a psychologist. So a psychiatrist is a little bit more medical. I'm not entirely sure.
It's a different route.
Yeah, so I think you would start off with a BSc side of things, so almost like a med degree, and then focus on the mental health of a person. So the main difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is that a psychiatrist can hand out medication, a psychologist can't. And then even within, so I'm a psychologist, not a
psychiatrist. Sorry. She meant to say no, sorry. I meant to say psychometric. So she wants to know how you got to be where you got to.
Sorry, Alpheus, is it? Sorry about that. Okay, psychometrist. Okay, so you can do either a BCom in industrial psych or like I did a BA in normal psychology, get your degree. Then you can do your honors. So again, depending on the path that you go, so you might do your BCom honors in industrial psych. In my case, I did a BA counseling psychology honors, and then through UJ, I did a 6-month practicum to become a psychometrist. An alternative way of completing it is after your honors degree. There's UJ, there's University of Free State, I think, and there's 2 other universities that I can't quite remember right now that run the 6-month program to become a psychometrist. It involves, it's quite a practical program, 720 hours of practice, and then you need to write the board exam. So you need an honors degree in some sort of psychology, followed by a 6-month practicum. Then you write a board exam with the HPCSA, and then you can become a psychometrist. Then to become a psychologist, you need to complete a master's degree. Cool.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other? If there are no other questions, I've posted on the chat the link to the Jetflix. So if you know of anyone that can benefit from the talk we had today, or you want to see what other talks we had as part of the Career Hub or as part of OJET, you're welcome to click on the YouTube channel. And just to look, next webinar is on the 22nd of June. The next normal building resilience in the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 workplace is with Sarah Coyne, which I think, Pakeezah, she's also from JVR, right? So
she's one of our connections, yes.
Okay. So just for you to reserve your place for the 22nd of June. But I just want to thank you, Pakeezah, for really interesting and important talk. You really ease the tension or stress that people may have from doing online assessment. I really love the message that you had, that it's okay, don't cheat, be honest, and you know what, if it's not working out, you may not be the right fit. And at the end of the day, it's a two sides. The company is looking for a good fit, but you also want to make sure that you're the right fit for the position and for the workplace. And I think you really gave us such good tips and understanding of where and why and what it is. And I really want to thank you for that.
Most welcome, and thank you for the opportunity once again.
Thank you. And I wish you all good afternoon and enjoy the rest of the day.
Enjoy your afternoon, everyone.